Now, I said to you at the beginning that we've got the program that I hope that this has exceeded your expectations, number one. But remember, I also ask you, if you will, to kind of stay in your seats for just a few more minutes. We've got 2 more presentations, and then we'll be able to go. Our next presenter is Dr. Jay Greenstein and his vital message. Please remember to stay just a couple seconds afterwards. He will be, Dr. Greenstein is the CEO of Kaizo Health Clinical Research Institute. He's chairman of the Clinical Compass and chairman of the World Olympians and a scholarship program. Dr. Greenstein.
Thank you, Dr. Sportelli. It is actually a great honor to be introduced by you, because when I was a young man at University of Maryland, had no idea what I wanted to do in life, kind of majored in partying at the University of Maryland. My mom said, you know, you should think about going to my chiropractor and maybe talking to him about chiropractic. And the first thing he did is he handed me a book called Introduction to Chiropractic, written by Dr. Lou Sportelli. And that book, sir, changed my life. So thank you very much. So it's a great privilege today to be speaking with this esteemed group of colleagues, and I want to get to the why. But first, before I get to the why of why research matters, I actually want to get to the who. So with a show of hands, how many people in the room know what the clinical compass is? Raise your hands. Okay, so clearly not enough. So the clinical compass is a volunteer group of colleagues, chiropractors, who support the profession by building clinical practice guidelines and best practice guidelines for the profession. We were formed by the Congress of Chiropractic State Associations in 1995 because visionaries in our field realized that we needed to have clinical practice guidelines, because if we didn't build them ourselves, then others who didn't have our best interests at hand would build them for us. So the work that we do is really important and has tremendous impact. And again, I'll get to the impact in just a minute. But it's important to understand that we're not just looking at the scientific literature, because the scientific literature has gaps. There's no way to have every single condition and every single intervention documented by science, because it evolves. So we also incorporate what's called the Delphi process, where we recruit a field of expert clinicians, a group of expert clinicians in the field, to identify what actually is working in clinical practice. We send out seed statements, and then those seed statements are reviewed, and then there's feedback on those seed statements until that expert panel comes back with consensus. And we incorporate that with the scientific literature to create these best practice papers. Our mission is really, really clear. It's to improve patient outcomes by advancing evidence-based care. And evidence-based care, again, is the best available evidence. It's also patient values, but again, what about clinician experience? It's critically important that that's included. I want to give a huge shout out to the Florida Chiropractic Association. They have been staunch supporters of Clinical Compass, and it's also important to know that a small but very important part of your dues goes to supporting research through the Clinical Compass. I also think it's really important that we acknowledge the work that NCMIC does in supporting research in chiropractic. They spend millions, or I should say invest millions of dollars to ensure that our future is secure. So I think we need to give it up for NCMIC. So now the answer becomes why? Why is this so important? So with a show of hands, how many people in the room remember the policy that came out from United Healthcare that said chiropractic was no longer medically necessary for the treatment of headaches? Show of hands. Now, I don't know about you, but I was like dumbfounded. In fact, Dr. Ray Foxworth sent me an email. He's like, hey, Jay, have you seen this? And I'm like, that can't be true. There's no way that's true. Like, we've been down this road before. We have fought this battle before. Then a couple of friends of mine that used to sit on the Chiropractic Professional Advisory Committee with Optum, with me, representing the state associations, because you always want to have a seat at the table, otherwise you might be eating for dinner. And so they reached out to me and said, hey, Jay, have you heard about this policy? And I was like, somebody sent me an email, but I'm trying to verify, like, is this actually happening? Well, in fact, it was true. Somebody sent me the link to this policy. It's right there. And I was like, okay, so what are we going to do about this? Well, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to the literature, right? Who are we going to call? We're going to call the Clinical Compass. So we have what's called the Rapid Response Resource Center on our website, And there's a whole host of resources available to the entire profession that has summaries of the literature for all the conditions that we treat on a regular basis, one of them being headaches. And so I reached out to Cheryl Hawk, who was our scientific commission chair, and I said, Cheryl, let's send out the headache literature to the ACA. They're willing to actually write a letter, go to bat for the profession, and fight this policy. So that, in addition to Dr. Dean Smith, who has a great podcast, great website, it's called Chiropractic Science. He sent some literature to us as well, and we forwarded this all to the ACA. They also had some of their own literature, and we sent it off to United Healthcare. And we had 38 state associations sign on to this letter. We had Chiro Congress signing on, the American Black Chiropractic Association sign on, Clinical Compass sign on, and within 30 days, the policy was reversed. So what I want everybody to understand is really two important lessons learned. Research is our ammunition to fight the war against injustice. But the second really important lesson to learn is that collaboration within our profession is critical, and it's the only way we get shit done. So we talk about impact, let's do the math. So what does this look like? Let's just say that there's 50,000 chiropractors out there in the US. They treat one United Healthcare headache patient per day. The average reimbursement, let's just say, is about $50. 5 days a week, they're treating one patient a day. 52 weeks out of the year. How much money is that? It's a lot of money. It's about $650 million. That's the financial impact of us reversing that policy. But we got into this profession for more than just money. We actually got into it to help people. It's about the patients. And so at the end of the day, research actually provides access. Can you imagine if patients who had headaches did not have access to chiropractic care? I mean, how terrible is that? So it's the evidence that provides access. And by the way, these policies that are put down by the insurance companies, that are forced upon us by third-party payers and these third-party administrators, they limit access. In Maryland and in DC and in Virginia, one of the largest payers actually said, you know what, we're no longer going to cover chiropractic for kids 12 and under. And we again went back to the literature through the Clinical Compass, and we fought that policy, and now they're covering chiropractic for kids 12 and under. So again, research provides access. Clinical Compass believes in collaboration. We work with lots of different organizations around the world to support chiropractic and research. I have to give a huge shout out to Claire Johnson, editor-in-chief for JMPT. She is the person who allows every single one of our publications to be open access to the profession. So we need to give it up for JMPT and Claire Johnson. In the research that we're doing, we're supporting the Canadian Chiropractic Guideline Initiative for their spinal stenosis project. We're also supporting a pregnancy-related low back pain project. One of the most important things happening around the world right now is this question again around chiropractic and pediatrics. The Australians are dealing with this. There was just a news article that came out about British Columbia investigating whether or not pediatrics or infants should be treated with the use of chiropractic care. And so again, collaboration and working with these organizations with the Clinical Compass is an important component of what we're doing on a day in and day out basis. And again, the literature will support making sure that our patients and our future patients have access. So what are the accomplishments recently? Well, this year we have just been accepted to JMPT for our best practices recommendation for chiropractic management of the patients with neck pain. That was just accepted, and I think it's important to understand that within these best practices guidelines, it talks a lot about documentation. Because when treatment frequency and duration comes up, like how often and how frequently should a patient be treated, how long should a patient be treated for, these confounding variables, these comorbidities need to be documented in your notes in order to ensure that you can actually treat the patient and get reimbursed for the services and the value that you're providing. Our next project is Clinical Practice Guidelines for the Chiropractic Management of Chronic Pain. You've heard it from the panel today. You hear it all the time that chronic pain is a huge problem, not only in this country, but around the world. So we're going to attack this problem with this particular clinical practice guideline. And the great thing about this guideline is that it's interdisciplinary. We've got a medical doctor on the panel. We've got a psychiatrist on the panel to help support interdisciplinary approaches to these problems. Christine talked about big data. We talked a lot about big data throughout the weekend. One of the elements of big data is claims data, and the Clinical Compass has supported the Whedon studies that looked at chiropractic's impact on the opioid crisis. And here's what we found in the first series of studies, that when a patient saw a doctor of chiropractic, they were 55% less likely to get an opioid prescription. Total drug costs were 78% lower. And adverse drug events were reduced by 51%. Now we're doing round two. That was 13,000 subjects in the first study. Now we're doing round two. We have over 100,000 data points that we're looking at, and that is being submitted for publication this year. 3 states, 100,000 patients. Big data will tell this story very well for chiropractic, but most importantly, to help solve the opioid crisis for the patients that we serve. So again, oh my God, my voice. I've been talking a lot this weekend. So when it comes to solving problems and helping to support the communities and our patients, who are you going to call? Well, you're going to call the Clinical Compass. Because again, there are other policies that are out there by third-party payers and third-party administrators that are actually so unjust. So Aetna came out with a policy, believe it or not, that said things like active release technique and Cox flexion distraction technique are not medically necessary. They're not supported by the evidence. And again, when it comes down to evidence-based practice, at the very least, clinician experience and the outcomes we get with using these tools are extremely important. And so we have to be able to fight these policies again through best practice guidelines where we include clinician experience with the best available scientific literature to drive policy change. So a great quote by Joel Osteen: "You will never change what you tolerate." And I know for me, Debbie, give it up, you can clap. You will never change what you tolerate. And I know for me, I will no longer and I will not tolerate the injustices that we face in preventing patients from having access to chiropractic care. And the way that we fight these intolerances is through research. So I want to thank the FCA, I want to thank Dr. Sportelli and NCMIC, and I want to thank you all today for having me here.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it.